a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh, my goodness. Two on the clock.
Hello and welcome back to the Basketball Fix podcast. My name is Ryan Tucker, the host of today's show. With me, as always, the two main men, NBL expert Josh Higgins and NBL expert, we can call him that now, Jeremy Dark. Ooh. Welcome, boys.
Oh, you've been upgraded, mate. That's always nice, isn't it? But Ness, mate, thank you. Happy New Year as well. I know it's been a little bit of a mumble-jumble end of the year, and especially with the NBL, all these weird runs and rounds running through from bloody Saturday to Wednesday and all sorts of stuff. We're going on a 12-game run again this week, or 12 days of January. It's going to be an interesting sort of end of the season for sure, mate. But yeah, looking forward to talking all about it.
Yeah, it's been wild, and it feels a little bit weird, Ryan, coming into this week, and our teams are on losing runs, and Josh's team actually got a win. So it feels a little, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable, really.
Yeah,
FC MVP, baby.
We'll get into that in just a second, but it is just, we're recording on Monday, one of the days, I think one of only 3 days from the 20th of December to the 26th of January where there isn't an NBL game on. We're almost finished round 15, 2 games remaining, as Josh alluded to, on Tuesday, Wednesday. Illawarra up against Tasmania, the two top teams of the league right now, and then Brisbane and New Zealand. Josh, we were speaking a little bit offline. This could be a pretty big game for Brisbane. We'll get into that in a second. But when we look at the round that's just gone, there's been some pretty big moments, mate, and none bigger than Bryce Cotton.
Yeah, it's been exciting, hasn't it? I know I get my little Perth Wildcats chance here, and I get a bit of a stiffy as well when I talk about Bryce and the Perth Wildcats, especially after another big win. Sorry to all the kids at home, but obviously another massive game. You know, coming into this particular game, I think fresh off of the 59-point game, the last time these two teams matched up, I think the question was how many can he score again? Because without PJC, this team has sort of been leaking points, and obviously they've lost 7 or 8 of their last 9 games since Taco Fall jumped in as well. So it was an interesting game, though. Bryce finished with 41 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals on 50% shooting. Now, when you look at it a little bit deeper as well, he also finished the game with only 1 turnover, 0 fouls, and played 38 minutes as well. So we are speaking about one of the truest professionals. I think if you look at the word professional dictionary, it has a photo of a goat and then a photo next to it of Bryce Cotton, and that is the dictionary meaning of professionalism. But this guy is a freak. I think a lot of people are talking about, obviously, the free throw count, which is 12 of 16, so 16 times he went to the strike. But you've got to understand, this guy's 6 foot. So, you know, probably early on in this season, he was early on in his career, I should say, he was very easy going by just shooting 3-point shots. But we've seen him turn into a scorer. You know, we talked to Al Green a couple of weeks ago on the podcast on the one-on-ones, and we spoke about Bryce Cotton, and he said he's not just a shooter, he's a scorer, because he doesn't just shoot from the 3-point line. He doesn't just score inside. He gets to the line, and he gets to the line at a very efficient rate as well. So I'm loving everything about Bryce. You know, we're looking at one of the most historical seasons in NBL history, and it's like LeBron James, for example, or Michael Jordan back in the day. People will continually hate a little bit on greatness, and I think we've still got to sit back and enjoy it, because this is his 5th 40-point game this year, and we've still got, 8 or 9 games for most of these teams left. So he's going to go down in the history books, and this is going to go down as one of the most exciting seasons ever.
The photo of the goat you had in the dictionary there, was that Andrew Gaze or an actual goat?
Nah, proper goat. Nice mountain goat, I reckon. Nice
hard
big
to
goat
tell the
and a broady
difference,
goat. Oh,
Jez,
it's definitely an interesting one.
You were saying that maybe Cotton has saved the Wildcats' arse again with his performance as the team. They've just, all through this season, it's either Bryce Cotton has balled out and been the dominant player in the team, or the team has been really good and Cotton's taken a bit of a back seat or hasn't been there. Are they going to find a happy medium, or is it this what we can expect from the Wildcats kind of going forward?
Yeah. I don't know. It feels like I always have to be the devil's advocate here against Perth. I'm absolutely not a Perth hater, but someone's got to try and balance out the amount of love and affection from the guy. I don't know. This
You're
guy,
a Jackie's fan, I guess.
In the skirt. Yeah.
No love and affection there.
No, absolutely not. But, I don't know. I just still, as I think I repeatedly say when Josh is giving all this love, is I am a little bit worried about Perth in the long haul when it comes to heading into the playoffs. Like Bryce is the greatest, arguably, and he can do some amazing things. But can he win Perth 3 games in a semi, or 2 games in a semi-final and 3 games in a final? I am not entirely sure, considering that some opposition are going to be able to shut him down. So I'm just a little bit worried that he has to score 41 points, and the only other person in the match that scores double digits is Ben Henschel on 11 points. That is an absolute concern. I think you look at the teams that are above them in the league, and they've just got more breadth and they've got more depth in scoring, for one. And then obviously Perth have their defensive troubles that we've discussed on previous podcasts as well. So it is a little bit scary. And I just sort of would expect in these types of games against New Zealand that Bryce could be a little bit more of a deliverer. Like, I'm worried that he scores 41 points and gets 5 assists because there's nobody else scoring. You'd like to see Cotton have, closer to 10 assists than 5 assists, I think, to feel more comfortable, because then it means he's getting these other players involved and he's got another scoring option, like it was when Dylan Windler went off and we saw Cotton get up. I think it was 9 or 10 assists in that game. So that's more of a game that I would like to see consistently from Perth, instead of Cotton scoring 40 and nobody else being able to score any points at all.
Yeah, it's definitely tough though, because like when we look at the Wildcats for the rest of the season, and again, I'll bite back. You've got the dog barking again, but like I still think it's hard to contain Cotton. Like I don't really care who you've got. Like we've seen him put up huge numbers against even the Illawarra Hawks, who he scored 40 against, who have probably been the best consistent defensive team all year. So I think over a 3 or 5 game series, it's going to be incredibly hard. Their home record this year is 7-3. So that's a really, really good thing for Perth Wildcats fans, and I guess the team to really rally around. When it comes back home, you've got a really good record. And away as well, they've somehow scraped to 5-6. The start of the year, they were horrendous on the road, and obviously without Bryce. So this little home-away stretch has been pretty good, and I'm looking forward to obviously them coming back home. I think they finished the season with 4 of their last 6 games back at RAC Arena, so they're really going to ricochet back into the playoffs.
It is important, though, to kind of just look at that in a 3-game series. If Perth can't get the home court advantage, then it will be, I believe, very important that the team is able to rally around Bryce, because there is every chance in the world that one of those 3 games he might have a bad shooting game, and then another game they'll win, and in that 3rd game, even and especially if it's away, then Perth, I believe, are in really big trouble in that game. If it's a deciding game on the road and maybe coming off a bad performance, then somebody needs to get into double digits, or Bryce needs to be able to deliver a little bit more to his teammates to get them going, because if it's maybe a Tassie or a South East Melbourne that are one of the best defensive teams in the league, they will be doing everything to shut Bryce down, and they'll say, you make somebody else beat us, because we're not letting Bryce get to the basket.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like we'll touch on it a little bit later when we talk on, the end of the season and I guess these records. But the end of the season ladder is really going to dictate who has success in the playoffs, because there's about 8 teams who are a chance, I think personally, of going all the way, or at least having a very deep playoff run. So you'd rather get matched up against, I think, like a Brisbane or an Adelaide or something in the first round, or right now Melbourne look very, very vulnerable. Would you rather be matched up with them, obviously, against the Illawarra Hawks? Like, there's a lot of questions with the league. Like, it's a really, really close league, and I'm loving every bit of it, though. It's been super exciting.
You can even look at the Hawks. Hawks have dropped 2 games at home. Their last 2 games, both at home. So, it is. It's all going to be about home and away form. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. While we're on United a little bit there, let's delve into their kind of performance or form over the last few games. Got touched up by the Adelaide 36ers most recently here. And Jez, I'm just like we spoke about it on the phone. Is like what has happened to them? Why are they suddenly just kind of not showing up in their games?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm mostly shocked about their defense, to be honest. They were able to score points, and they've gone on this run now. What is it? They've lost 5 of their last 6, and their only win in that was against Cairns, and it was a 76-66 victory, which is good for their defense, but pretty poor considering their offense had been producing. So, yeah, I don't know. It is completely derailed. You dive in a little bit to sort of how they were playing. They had 4 wins before they went on this, or 5 wins before they went on this little stretch. But in 4 of those games, that was the golden period of Chris Goulding, where he dropped 23 3 points, shooting at 46% from the perimeter. So they were outscoring their opponents. But during that time, like the numbers defensively, in the most simplest form in points against, it's very, very unfamiliar numbers for Melbourne United, because in their past 12 games, they've averaged 97.83 points against. In their last 6, so in this stretch where they've had 5 losses and 1 win, it's exactly 100 points per game against. And in those 5 losses in that stretch, 106.8 points per game against. So we're not really used to that, I think, from Melbourne United. They've always been a team that's been able to shut down their opposition. And like obviously last season, it was a defensive battle, the final series. It was the 2 best defensive teams in the league that made it all the way. And yeah, they've just lost that. They haven't been able to shut down their opponents. And we saw that obviously against Adelaide. Plus they had a bad shooting night. So if they're not shooting and relying on like these stretches like Chris Goulding went on, they're in big trouble. Like they had an awful shooting night against Adelaide. Adelaide are one of the worst defensive teams in the league when it comes to field goal percentage and 3-point percentage against. And Melbourne were atrocious. They shot 36% from the field and they shot 31% from 3. You're not going to win games, especially against Adelaide, who are going to rack up points when you've got Montrezl Harrell and Kendrick Davis scoring 28 points each and Vasiljevic scoring 19. You're not going to win that game. And you're not going to win really any game in this competition shooting so poorly and against one of the most poor defensive teams in the NBL. So they're in real big trouble by the looks of things.
And Josh, for Adelaide, they, welcome back DJ here, and he's been instrumental to the team's success this season with his scoring. But I want to also focus on Kendrick Davis. He must be pretty much now the only competitor to Bryce Cotton in the MVP race. His performances for this team have just been outstanding, and I feel a little bit bad for him that the rest of the team isn't good enough to put him further up the rankings on the standings as a team. How do you see Kendrick Davis, his performances, and where Adelaide are right now?
Yeah, well, this game was an interesting one because, like, when we analyse this game from a standpoint of obviously what happened in the last meeting that happened with obviously Adelaide taking on Melbourne United at John Cain Arena, there was a lot of feeling in this game. So it was talked about as well, and I think Adelaide really rose to the level of competition, and I think they obviously got the crowd going. That was exciting. Like Montrezl Harrell hyping the crowd out, Kendrick Davis getting them going as well. It was really important because they were the 6th player on the court for the whole game, and it was super, super exciting. And, you talk about Kendrick Davis, so 28 points, 11 rebounds, 5 turnovers, but also had 5 rebounds, 2 steals and a block. And what I think has been most impressive about him is he's playing 34 minutes majority of the time, 34 to 35 minutes per game. So that's tremendous. One, obviously a testament to his fitness and I guess the level of determination that he has, because you can still be fit, but you can still drain out mentally. That's the biggest thing. You can still be running and still have that aerobic fitness, but when the mentality's not there to continue to compete at a high level, you do see drop-offs, and that's where you see the really good players separate themselves from the superstar players. So it's going to be interesting, but yeah, obviously Dejan Vasiljevic was super exciting. The game before, I think he had 20 points off the bench, something like that. And then he finally starts this week, has 19 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and the 1 block as well. So what you're starting to see now is what I was sort of touching on at the start of the year, where I was sort of putting them in that, I guess, championship caliber, because Dejan Vasiljevic, Isaac Humphries, Montrezl Harrell and Kendrick Davis would nearly be, I guess, some of the toughest 4-man combination in the league. And there's obviously the depth drops off there, but they've still got Sunday Dech to come back into this team. I still think, Nick Marshall had a 0-minute game in this particular one. Jason Kadei's been pretty serviceable. He's only coming in to essentially facilitate and hit a 3-point shot every now and then. So I still think the ceiling is quite high for the Adelaide 36ers. And, when you've got Montrezl Harrell still putting up 28 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist and 3 blocks, Like it's a deadly combination between him and obviously Kendrick Davis. So I'm excited, but at the end of the day, though, I think there's a lot of questions about Melbourne United. I think Jez was bang on with all of his points, but I still think, and I know I got crucified for this at the start of the season, but an aging roster, which they do have, is starting to hurt them. Matthew Dellavedova, I think, is really hurting them. He shot more 3-point shots on the weekend than Chris Goulding did. So that's a massive indication as to how good they're going, because if you've watched Delly since he was a junior coming through, he's never been a 3-point shooter. He's been to get to the basket and draw some cheap fouls, and he's been a consistent defender, and that's about it. So lots of alarm bells ringing in Melbourne United for sure.
And boys, Southeast Melbourne are a team that is kind of flying a little bit under the radar. They have won 6 of their last 8, and you can go back even more games and they're kind of win-loss there each one. But wins against Tasmania, wins against Illawarra, Melbourne United. They're just a completely different team this season, and especially since Josh King has taken over. Are we seeing finally the resurgence and the like, we're here now from Southeast Melbourne, or is it a bit of a facade? Josh, what do you think?
Nah, I definitely think this is not a facade. This team is genuinely flying. You don't go down to Illawarra. I think they played Illawarra at home. You don't go to Illawarra and beat the Illawarra Hawks, and then you don't go to Tasmania very often and beat Tasmania in My State Bank Arena. So they were on an 8-game win streak, I believe, the Tassie Jack Jumpers down there, and they went down there and humiliated a team as much as you can, the Jack Jumpers. Like a 14-point win is as big as a win you probably see from any other team down there at My State Bank Arena. And it's really exciting because I think the way when you look at this team, and I sometimes sit in the car, this is a bit embarrassing, but I sort of rehearse these podcast discussions a little bit when I'm driving home from work. And I was sat there talking about to myself the South East Melbourne Phoenix, and like their depth, I think, is actually underrated. Like if you look at this team, for example, so off the bench on the weekend, they still had Matt Kenyon, who's a solid defender, had Angus Glover. Ben Ed didn't even play. Tom Vodanovic obviously comes off the bench and provides good minutes and a bit of strength and a bit of a grunt as well. Joe Wieskamp is having an underrated sort of back end of the season now. He's really starting to find his form. And then you've got Owen Foxwell as well, who Josh King loves. He comes on there, he defends hard. He was playing Owen Foxwell at certain points of that game against the Tassie Jack Jumpers over Derek Walton Jr. because Derek Walton Jr. wasn't defending at a high enough clip for Josh King. So really, really impressed by this team. They obviously had 5 players in double digits in Jordan Hunter, Derek Walton Jr., Matt Hurt, Malik Lewis, and Joe Wieskamp. And if you were to say to a South East Melbourne Phoenix fan last week that you would beat the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers in Tasmania by 10 plus points and Nathan Sobey would only score 4 points, I think every single Phoenix fan would laugh at me, especially with how Sobey's been playing. So I think that's another little confidence boost that this team needs because, they've obviously been so reliant on guys like Nathan Sobey and guys like Matt Hurt and even Derek Walton Jr. To see one of them not have a great game, I think that really gives a lot of confidence to these other guys as well. So I'm really happy for them. Obviously, this franchise has had little to no success in their entire existence so far, but Josh King's got them going now. He's 9-4 since he took over the team, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do potentially in the playoffs as well.
Jez, Matt Hurt has been really critical for their scoring, and once the team kind of figured out a little bit the what do you call it, how to distribute the ball between Sobey, Derek Walton Jr. and Matt Hurt, it felt like that Hurt was unleashed a little bit, and he's had scored 19 or more points in 6 of his last 9 games. Do you think they need to give him a little bit more opportunity to shoot, or is he at a good level, or he had a bit of a poor game against Sydney, only scoring 13 points? But where does Matt Hurt sit in this? Is he going to be the guy that's going to take them one step further?
I think he simply just is playing the role that he needs to play at the moment for South East Melbourne. I think he has a really, really good relationship coming from the same or going to school in the same area that Josh King grew up. It feels like they've really, really clicked when you listen to any sort of interview or comments about them. They're on exactly the same level, and you almost actually feel it though that everybody's on the same level as Josh King. I think everybody's starting to understand their role. I think when Josh King came in, we saw Matt Hurt sort of fall out of form a little bit or not be as productive. But like you mentioned, he's come on like nothing else at the moment, but he just is doing exactly what he needs to do. He's either working really hard down low and doing the hard stuff, or he's scoring points or distributing the ball. So I think he's playing exactly the role that he needs to play. I think even, like you said, even Nathan Sobey is playing the role that he needs to play. And now we're starting to see Derek Walton Jr. come back on, which is obviously going to shift things. And I think that makes them incredibly dangerous. Like you said, Sobey has been arguably their best player. Him and Matt Hurt have been their best players over this period where they've been winning. And then all of a sudden, Sobey has a bad game and they still beat the Jack Jumpers by 14 points. So they just, I see them as an absolute dark horse to win the championship at the moment, because you saw what they did. They played the right game against Illawarra. They didn't try and stop Illawarra. They outscored Illawarra, and that's the way you beat the Hawks at the moment. And then Tasmania, they hit hard in the paint. They took advantage of Will Magnay being out. They found the weaknesses of Tasmania and they crushed them. So it goes down to coaching, and they're actually being able to get what they need out of each player depending on their opposition. And I think that's what's important. It's what makes them dangerous, because they're able to adjust and they're able to attack teams in different ways and the right ways to be able to get victories or give themselves a chance to win.
Well, if you are a betting man or lady, Southeast Melbourne are currently $14 to win the NBL 25 championship. So if you think Jez has a bit of a point there with his dark horse, then that could be the pick. Massive moments from the almost finished round 15. Now we're going over to our favourite segment of the Beyond the Buzzer podcast, the Guess Who. Josh, take us away.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to really dumb these Guess Who segments down just so we can give our poor little friend Jez a bit of a crack. And I'm trying to make these as simple as possible. So let's run through this one quickly before we head to the break. So I'm a 22-year-old. I'm the leader of my team in the NBL. I will soon be in the NBA. I'm a point guard. Who am I? All right, let's go to a quick little break here. And once we come back, we'll redo the questions. Yes, we'll give you a long break, mate, I think. But we'll redo the questions and we'll get the boys' final thoughts. All right, Jez. You ready to go, mate? I've got this one. I think this kid has been a star. Like I'll try to give you a few hints outside of the questions. This kid has been a star. So I'm a 22-year-old. I'm currently the leader of my NBL team. I will soon be in the NBA. I'm a point guard for my team. Who am I? All right. What's your first initial thoughts,
Taron
mate?
Armstrong.
Yes.
It's got to be.
Thank you. Thank God. All right. There we go.
Are you sure he's going to make the NBA?
He is going to make the NBA, mate. 28 points on the weekend against the Hawkies. Led that team on the court, off the court. He's their spiritual leader. This kid is a genuine superstar in the making, I think. You know, we've got Josh Giddey, for example. This kid's putting up better numbers than Giddey was back in the day when he was playing for the 36ers. So I think we've really got to watch out for this kid to continue to grow. And I know we had a segment a couple of weeks ago. We touched on, you know, guys who particularly might make the NBA, and we didn't actually speak about Taron, but I think that's because he's a genuine lock to make the NBA next year compared to other guys. So Taron Armstrong, not Armstrong, but Taron Armstrong is the Guess Who of the week. Lovely work, Jez. Good job.
I'm 2 from 3 now, I think.
You are in the last 3 weeks, yeah. But I reckon you're 2 of about 15 when we go to the whole season, though.
You're only as good as your last win.
Did you do any research?
That's why the Hawks are the worst team.
Did you have to do any research, or did you just get it straight off the bat?
No, I just got it now. I don't even look at this section in our run sheet anymore because it just wastes my time.
See, it means that the introduction was well deserved. That you are now an NBL expert. You just know this stuff now.
No, it's all here.
Next week we can make it really obscure. I'll start putting statistics back in there and maybe even points per 40 minutes and all that sort of stuff. We'll really try to mess Jeremy around for sure.
Do it. Bring it on, buddy.
That's it. We love a bit of controversy in the Beyond the Buzzer, and there is no list or anything more controversial than a top 10 player list, which we want to hear now from Josh Higgins. Your Higgins Hot 10 best players this season, mate. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so we'll start this off. So Higgins Top 10 is the 10 top players of the season so far. I know there's other lists out there, but this is the only list that you really need to pay attention to and I guess sort of delve into a little bit as well. Shout out my man. But let's get into it. So obviously we're going to do, this episode is going to be from player number 10 to player number 6. So next week we'll finally reveal the top 5 players. But I think this one has got a little bit of controversy wrapped around it because it's got a certain MVP candidate in the mix. But for number 10 currently, we've got Matt Hurt at number 10. We've got Xavier Cooks at number 9, Chris Goulding at number 8, PJC at number 7, and Kendrick Davis at number 6. So I think Kendrick Davis is the one that a lot of people are going to question, and I can understand why. And I know Rucker did his list as well, and he copped a lot of flack about Kendrick Davis early on in the season when he was just starting this little bit of a tear. And I think he had him at 12 or 10 or something like that. And, you know, obviously everyone bit back and sort of said a little bit. But if you actually go and do a little bit of research, he wasn't too far off at that particular time because there's a lot of reasons why Davis isn't probably a top 3 player in the league. I know statistically he is probably a top 2 player in the league, but if you go a little bit deeper as well, which is where you've got to do with these particular sort of lists and everything, you'll see some questions. But boys, before I get into it, obviously, I want to get your thoughts because I've got all the data here as well. I'd love you to sort of pick it apart a little bit from 10 to 6. You know, people might say Matt Hurt's a little bit too high out. Even Xavier Cooks, Chris Goulding may be too high in other people's books. What are your first initial thoughts, I guess, from part 1 of Higgins' top 10?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, it's pretty crazy. You've got some pretty big names in this bottom 5 of the top 10 because if we think at the start of the season, obviously Parker Jackson Cartwright was a top 3 candidate. Xavier Cooks, top 3, top 4 candidate. And then, yeah, we've got some surprising names in there, really. Even like Chris Goulding, I think, is probably a little bit higher than what most people would initially feel, I guess. And then, yeah, Matt Hurt. I think Matt Hurt deservedly is in a top 10 list because like we just talked about, he's been phenomenal for them. He's a real role player. He's stepped up and really come out of the blue. Nobody expect him to come to the NBL and be as important for a team. And if they go a long way, he's definitely going to be in the conversation more and more, I believe. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's really, really tough. Like, I think the biggest one for me is probably how low you've got Xavier Cooks, to be honest, being in at 9. I know we sort of expected him to be a little bit more of an offensive force maybe, but I think the key statistic for me is his plus minus differential. Is he top 3, but he has a plus minus top 4 of plus 179 on the court. So that for me means, yeah, we know Sydney are having some struggles. And they haven't been as dominant as we thought that they would be. But maybe it's got absolutely nothing to do with the quality of player, obviously, that Xavier Cooks is. He's definitely important for them defensively just as much as he is offensively. But I think I can maybe understand that he's not in that sort of top 3, top 5, purely based on maybe we expected a little bit more from him offensively and to be a little bit more dominant down low, and even his versatility and being able to shoot a little bit more than we've seen maybe. So yeah, like, I don't know, it's hard to attack this list until we see who you've got in the top 5, but I think there's some very, very controversial or players that other people might think should be a little bit higher. But yeah, the biggest shock definitely for me is Xavier Cooks at number 9.
Yeah, I'm going to say that it's a little bit shocking for me that he's even in the 10. His plus minus, he has the biggest minus of the top 15, 14 players. Matt Hurt's at 15 has a bigger minus than what Cooks does. Sydney are shit. They've been beating up on bad teams. They haven't been winning against good teams. The rotation, say what you will about the rotations, but if your team isn't performing and you're supposed to be the best player on that team, then yeah, I don't know, you're not doing much for me. I haven't seen, a lot of fantastic play from Xavier Cooks this season. I think he's been inconsistent. I think Jalen Adams has probably had more games where he's played a bigger role in the team winning than what Xavier Cooks has. And other guys, Cam Oliver, I think, has been more integral to them winning. When he's been on the court and playing significant minutes, that's when Sydney have been winning. And when he's not playing, Sydney have been losing. So I would say that Xavier Cooks is maybe just outside the top 10. I think there's other players that maybe possibly could deserve a spot there that have been more integral to their team's success than what he has. And I think that, just bringing up the list that you've written now, Chris Golding as well. Yeah, he had a good run, a couple of games there where he shot the lights out at the start of the season. He wasn't really a fantastic player for the team. He was there, but he wasn't integral in the team winning. It was a 3 or 4 game period before he got injured where he was really, really good, but the rest of the season he was quite average, to be honest. PJC, fantastic. If he had have been a little bit more consistent, I think he would have been top 5. Davis, I think, is probably a top 5, but it's really hard. At that stage of around the 5, 6, 7 mark, you probably, it's a point of a difference in something where you just have to put him in some sort of order. So I'm not extremely not going to bounce on you for those ones in that spot. But I think Hurt, PJC, Davis all deserve to be in the top 10 discussion. Cooks and Goulding, I'm not so sure of.
Yeah, it's obviously, it's definitely good points you raise, and I'll sort of go a little bit into why I've got Chris Goulding in the top 10. I actually, when I first made this list up, I'll give you guys a bit of a hint. I actually had him at 4. That's how highly I've rated Chris Goulding's season, and it's for a number of reasons. Now, what the 2 stats that I really put the most emphasis on was how many points does your team score per 40 minutes when you're on the court, and how many points that you give up as a team when that particular player is on the court. So when Chris Goulding is on the court, the Melbourne United team will score 95.4 points per game per 40 minutes, which ranks him 21st in the league. So that's a really high statistic. Now, there's obviously a couple of the top guys in that that ahead of him, but the top guys who are sort of on this list essentially, or around this list, are really only Xavier Cooks and Jalen Adams. So 2 of potentially the top 15 are in the top 20 when it comes down to the offensive sort of rating essentially for these players. But where I really want to sort of go a little bit of a step further, and sorry, Bryce Cotton as well, but when I go a little bit step further though, it's the defensive end of the basketball court. Now, I'm not saying Chris Goulding is a top 20 defender right now when I say this right now, but his importance to the overall team structure right now is at an all-time career high essentially for Chris Goulding. So we've seen him be efficient on the defensive end, but I don't think we've seen him be this good on the defensive end. So he's currently ranked 21st in the league for opponent points per 40 minutes when he's on the court. So when he's on the court, his team is averaging 87.4 points per game to the opponents. So this list right now, I'll just give you guys a little bit of context, goes all the way up to 112 points per game. So Jesse Wagstaff currently right now is the worst defensive player essentially for the whole entire league at 112 points. So he's obviously in a really, really good stead there. But the Kendrick Davis one is the one that I think will surprise the most. I think we spoke about him off the top as being an MVP candidate and all that sort of stuff. But it's when you start to look at his numbers a little bit deeper. So obviously around the 24 points per game, 7.5 assists, 3.8 rebounds, 47% from the field, 1.5 steals per game. He has the 5th highest usage rate in the league, so he has a 28 usage rate. So per 100 possessions, he is finishing off 28 times. But it's where you really sort of dive in, I guess, to the stats a little bit more at a consistent level. So again, we're talking about the offensive rating essentially for Kendrick Davis. He's ranked as number 40 in the league. So when he's on the court, the LA 36ers are scoring 93 points per game. A good number, 100%, but could it be higher for a guy who's averaging 24 points and 7.5 assists? I think so for sure. Now, when we also look at his defensive ratings, this is where obviously it starts to take a little bit of a decline here for Kendrick Davis. And this is where I've slid him back a little bit compared to obviously some of the guys who we will touch on next week in the top 5 as well. So Kendrick Davis currently ranks at 67th in the league for the MP40 as well. So points allowed as a team consistently. So he's currently allowing, when he's on the court, the Adelaide 36ers are allowing 96 points per game. So a high number once again. Again, though, it's not all on Kendrick Davis, and this is where there can be a little bit of a discussion around these sort of statistics, because it's not essentially just one particular player. There's still 4 other players on the court when these ratings are out there. But it is showing, that there is a bit of a lapse. And you see it all the time with Kendrick Davis. I think Montrezl Harrell, we were either talking off air or on air, Jez, a couple of weeks ago about him screaming at Kendrick Davis to get back, playing high school basketball essentially like LaMelo Ball when he scored his 92 points. Just play offense and no defense. No. This is a team sport that requires offense and defense. So it's a really tough one to obviously narrow these down. And, I think a lot of people will be surprised with some of them. I think Sydney Kings fans will hopefully think that, Xavier Cooks deserves to be higher. But you look at his statistics and, he's okay in all categories, but there's nothing that really explodes out to me where he should be in the top 5 or he should be out of the 10. That's why he's sort of middle of the pack, I guess you could say. So, yeah, it's obviously tough, but it opens the discussions up. And if you want to get in contact with us, hit us up on Instagram, hit us in the YouTube comments here as well. Let us know what your 10 to 6 would be. And then obviously next week I'll reveal number 5 to number 1 as well.
It's great. It's a great discussion point because there is different ways to weight it, different ways to look at it, and depending on what you value yourself as a basketball fan, what's important. I think that's how your top 10 could play a little bit differently. It's fantastic to see and hear and listen to your motivations around them. We'll take a quick break, boys. We'll come back and talk about the current NBL standings and which teams we see maybe getting in the play-in tournament or possibly missing out. Okay, so as we said at the start of the show, we're recording on Monday. It is round 15 still. There's 2 more games to be played, Illawarra and Tassie on Tuesday, and then Brisbane and New Zealand on Wednesday. Now, as the standings stand right now, boys, Illawarra on 13 wins, 7 losses. They have played only 20 games, so it's the fewest games of the top 4 teams. Then we have Melbourne and Sydney, both played 22 games with 13 wins each. Perth, Tasmania, Southeast Melbourne round out the play-in spots. Brisbane and Adelaide are both on the outside on 9 wins each, and both have played 20 games. So they have a game in hand over Southeast Melbourne and possibly Perth if you want to look that high, but they're obviously 3 wins behind Perth at the moment. New Zealand and Cairns, for mine, are probably out of this. New Zealand on 8 wins, and obviously Cairns on 4 that don't even have a mathematical chance to get in. Boys, how do you see it? Josh, I'll throw to you first. Have we already seen the top 6 separate themselves, or is there a chance for some movement still?
Oh, there's definitely a chance for some massive movement. We've seen in recent weeks, obviously, with the Illawarra Hawks losing streak, with obviously Melbourne United on their losing streak. Sydney Kings have been inconsistent. The Wildcats have showed glimpses of being horrible. The Jackies, I don't think sometimes score enough. We saw that on the weekend against, obviously, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. Phoenix are looking pretty good, but also it's the Phoenix. History says that they will sort of cock it up towards the back end of the season. You got the Brisbane Bullets, who have got questions around them, the Adelaide 36ers. So what I'm trying to say right now, boys, is I've got no bloody idea who is going to make the top 6, because there's a world where Melbourne United fully skid off the top. Like, I look at their records, and they're not too bad, but I don't think there'd be too many Melbourne United seasons where they'd be 7 wins and 6 losses at home. That's a pretty damning stat. Like, Melbourne United have been a really, really good team at home the last couple of years, and to be 7 wins and 6 losses is a little bit of a worry. And, for some reason, they've still got 6 wins and 3 losses when they're away. So it's not really telling the story when you look at the statistics. It just shows how good they were to start the season and how poor they have been in recent weeks. So it's incredible. Like, I even look at the Sydney Kings, for example, 8 wins when they're away, 5 losses when they're away, and obviously only 5 wins and 4 losses when they're home. So, is it a little bit of an emphasis on most of these teams just love playing away because there's not as much pressure in front of their home crowd or anything like that? It's a really exciting point of the season. So I'm looking forward to when we sort of quickly touch on our top 6. So if you want me to go now, I'll quickly shoot out my top 6. But there's plenty going on.
We'll get back to that in just a sec. But Jez, the Melbourne United team historically bad at this time of the season when the Australian Open comes to town and they have to go on a big away run. Could we see them maybe steady themselves now and pick up a few wins based on the trends already this season?
Well, the last 6 games probably wouldn't suggest so, to be honest. But they were playing a lot. But they were playing a lot of those games at home. So, yeah, you really don't know. You never ever gonna rule out Melbourne United, because all of a sudden they could just get this shit together and start winning games again and sort out their defense, and they're going to be tough to beat. So you can't rule them out, but yeah, they're going to need to get some important wins over the next couple of weeks, I think, if they're not going to put themselves at risk. Because, like what we sort of dived into a little bit off air, is, all right, how many wins do you think you need to make the finals this year? Last year it was 13. So if you're looking at that, like Sydney, Melbourne and Illawarra all have 13 wins already. There is one extra game this year than there was last year, so 29 games instead of 28 games. But still, you would think that number is probably going to be somewhere or thereabouts. So Melbourne, might just have scraped in, because you think, okay, well, they've got 7 games to play. Are they going to go 1-6? They have just gone 1-6. So they're going to go 1-6 again and maybe get to that 14th or 15th win mark where you're most likely going to need to be. Yeah, I don't know. They are in a bit of a peculiar spot for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. Like we said, maybe their roster is a little bit older. Things do get a little bit tougher at the end of the season. They go on this away. They're on this away run at the moment, and then they might have to save their season in the last few rounds. So who knows? They're definitely not safe. No, I don't think anybody is safe, considering how different teams can go on some of these big runs that they're doing. So yeah, it's going to be a wild ride these next sort of 8 games, definitely.
Josh, you wondering maybe a little bit if they deserve to be so high up in the favouritism for the odds. They're sitting currently at second in the odds with the Sydney Kings to take out the championship. They've got a pretty tough run home. They're taking on the Breakers, the Hawks, then it's the Wildcats, Sydney, before finishing off with Brisbane, and then the Jack Jumpers and the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, who could possibly be playing for seeding or even a spot in the play-in at that stage. So it's by no means an easy run home for the Melbourne.
No, it's definitely not. The odds that I've got currently up, they're actually favourites in these odds, but I could be looking at old odds or whatever that is. But it's interesting because, like, you talk about the magic number there, Jez, and I think it's nearly 15. I think nearly 15 is the number to achieve to make the playoffs, because I think you can write off the Breakers and Cairns, essentially. And you look at most of those wins, if you're a top team, I think you could just pretty much nearly as close to tick those wins off, essentially. And if they're not going to win those games, they'll somehow, fluke in other games. So when we break that down a little bit further, and we look who plays Cairns and the Breakers, obviously, a little bit, you've got the Kings that play Cairns once. You've got Melbourne United who play, like Ryan just said before, they played the Breakers also once. But the key stat for me, though, is the fact that the Brisbane Bullets play Cairns twice and the Breakers twice. So let's just say for hypothetical situations, they win all 4 of those games. Or let's just be a little bit lenient, they win 3 of those games. That puts them to 12 wins. That still means, though, that they've got to win another 3 games. So they've got to win either 3 games against the Wildcats, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, the Hawks, United, and the 36ers. So 3 of those 5 games they need to win to make the playoffs, essentially, as well. So it's going to be super, super tight, because, I think we've seen tight seasons, and last season was a very tight season. The Bullets only just missed out in the last game of the year for making the top 6. And, it's going to come down to it again, because it's really going to come down to who capitalises on their home wins. And I think capitalising on these poor teams, because you've got to look at the Cairns Taipans and the Brisbane and the New Zealand Breakers as, I guess, really, really poor teams. And those have to be wins if you think you're going to be serious in making the NBL playoffs this year. But it's going to be super tight. I'm looking forward to it.
Just do you see maybe when Parker Jackson Cartwright comes back, or even maybe the Cairns games against Brisbane, that they're going to be getting up these 2, in quotation marks, bad teams to be a little bit of a spoiler, that they, Cairns love beating Brisbane, so they're going to want to try and dishevel their season. And New Zealand aren't going to want to sit back and just let teams walk over them as they finish off the year. Where do you see kind of just on the other end of the spectrum to what Josh was saying there about those two teams?
Yeah, well, I think we saw it just on the weekend with Illawarra losing to Cairns. That's the dead marker right there. Probably one of the biggest surprise wins, underdog wins up there in the history of the NBL, considering how poor Cairns were going, how good Illawarra looked. Like there's just no match is easy in the NBL at the moment, I don't think. I think we're going to see New Zealand start to be a little bit better. They I think, have the potential to be an absolute stirrer in the pot. Like you said, I think having only 8 wins is at the moment, sort of almost rules them completely out of making it, just by thinking how many wins the other teams have that are already above that line. But I think they can really get some surprise wins if they develop this new offense that they have with Taco Fall and Matt Mooney, and then all of a sudden PJC comes back, and if they can get that trio to click, they can mess some stuff up for sure. And I think you could even see Brisbane struggle in this game. I think this game for Brisbane is key. Otherwise, in my opinion, the top 6 is already set. Because if Brisbane lose this game against the Breakers on Wednesday, that could be their season right there.
All right. Okay, well, Josh, how about you hit us up with your top 6, and then we'll wrap up the show for today.
Yeah, it's tough. I've gone in. I'll go in order. I'll try and nail this off the top of my head. But we'll go. Illawarra will finish on top of the ladder. I think they got a decent run home. This is where it gets super, super tough. Now, I think the Sydney Kings will finish second this year on the ladder. I think the Perth Wildcats will finish third just because they play majority of their games at home to end the season. I then think the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers will finish fourth. I think Melbourne United will finish fifth, and I think the Brisbane Bullets will scrape in for number 6. I just have this thing with a bit of a redemption story because, we look at last season, like I said, they just missed out in the playoffs by 1 game. I think this year they just make the playoffs by 1 game as well. Because when you look South East Melbourne Phoenix compared to the Brisbane Bullets, what's one thing that the Brisbane Bullets have improved on or have a little bit of a chance to, I guess, get better on? That's bringing Josh Adams into the team. We know sort of what South East Melbourne Phoenix are, but we don't know what the finished product now is in the Brisbane Bullets. So, again, though, a really nice little schedule there. Cairns twice, the Breakers twice. It's super tight. Like, this is going to come down to the last game. Who do both teams play in the last round? You've got the Bullets taking on the 36ers, which could be even both of those teams fighting for that last spot. And then you've got South East Melbourne Phoenix. Haven't got their last game up here, but I think they take on Melbourne United. So it's going to be a derby to finish off the season, essentially. So, wow. I don't know. I got goosebumps thinking about how good this season's going to finish off. It's going to come down like it did the AFL this year, the last game of the year.
There's definitely going to be a cracking finish to the season, and you see that, those 3 teams on the cusp there with Brisbane, Adelaide, and South East Melbourne all will be playing each other in the last few rounds of the season. Well, boys, that's all we've got time for today. A fantastic episode looking back at the biggest moments, going through the first half of Josh's top 10, and then putting our thoughts towards who can make the playing tournament. That finals are just around the corner. Fantastic. The new year is here. We've broken it in. It's fantastic. The basketball fix is getting better and better. Josh, we have some new fan-driven podcasts to look out for this coming week.
Yeah, so obviously we've already got the Wildcats, the Illawarra Hawks, and the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers podcasts all up and running. But the New Zealand Breakers podcast, so all of the New Zealand fans out there, we're really excited for that one. Henry and Logan have just kicked off the Breakers Breakdown. It's a really good episode as well for 2 young fellas. Their knowledge, I guess, on not just all the players in New Zealand, but the way that the New Zealand Breakers are playing and really breaking down their sort of structure. It's unbelievable. So you've got to go and listen to that podcast and get involved with them as well. And the Sydney Kings boys will be kicking off their podcast this week as well. So expect that either later in the week to be out on Spotify and YouTube and everything like that, or early next week. So really excited for those boys to get started as well. It's just a really, really good time here at the Basketball Fix. So much going on. We're all busy. We're all flat out, but we're all enjoying our time here as well. So it's a really busy time of the year. I'm not going to know what to do myself, to be honest with you boys, once the season's all done and dusted. It's going to be a weird feeling.
we'll find some good stuff for you to do, mate. Boys, thanks for today. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, boys, we hope we've given you your basketball fix.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness!